are prepared to meet the challenge of an active shooter taking over or trying to take over your church? What are we going to do? What are you going to do? How are you going to prepare for this? Now, a lot of churches have what I call a security team. And a security team could be made up of civilians, just everyday people who volunteer to be a part of the security team. It could be made up of people who are involved in law enforcement, so they're correction officers or they work at the jail or the prisons, or they are police officers, state police officers. They're somewhere in the capacity of the juvenile criminal justice system, or they're police officers at many different levels. And the churches usually have one or two or three of these people, if not more, who are members of the church fellowship. And it's my understanding that a lot of law enforcement officers actually wear their weapons, their guns. They bring them to church because they are very seldom not wearing and carrying their guns. So they bring the guns to the mall. They bring their guns to the grocery store. Wherever they go, whatever they're doing, they have their weapons with them. And I think that that's appropriate for them to have their weapons with them. But my concern today is what is the church doing to prepare for an event where somebody comes into your church fellowship? And I remember, and I told the story before, but I'll say it again. I remember when I was preaching here at Global Ministries Christian Church. I usually preach from the floor, not from the pulpit, but I'm on the floor. And as I'm preaching on the floor, I'm engaging people while I'm preaching. I'm trying to keep them with the message. I'm asking them questions. I'm trying to point out some specifics about what I'm saying and get them to stay with me so that they're not on their phones and not looking at their email during the service, but they're engaging in the message with me. And a man came in through the back of the church, the rear door, and actually started walking down the aisle. I don't know where the ushers were, but this person started walking down the aisle. And I decided to walk into the person because, one, it was distracting to have them walking down the aisle, the same aisle that I was in while I was preaching. Two, I was not sure who this person was, and because they were off in a distance and coming toward me. And I said, a good offense or good defense is to have an offensive move. And so I walked into the person, literally walked into them, wrapped my arms around the person with a hug, not a stranglehold, but a hug. And the person kind of collapsed in my arms. And then I instructed this person to take a seat, and they did. But where were the security people in the church at the time when that happened? Where were the ushers at that time when it happened? And for some reason, and I cannot recall why nobody in the church attempted to talk with this person or nurture, spend some time with this person before they came down the aisle. And while they would let somebody that we didn't know or we didn't know who it was come that close to the pastor while the pastor was preaching. I'm saying all of that to say, way back then, maybe 20 years ago or 25 years ago when that happened, this church was not ready. This church was not prepared. And we used to have a state trooper in our church, and that state trooper was a part of our trustee team, our financial team, and was always there when the offering was collected. And he was always in the right place at the right time, and he carried, and I didn't have a problem with it. I've also mentioned to you that there was a church on Washington Street in Grove Hall that, I don't do it this way, but that pastor would drive to the bank on up in Mattapan Square. I don't know the name of the bank. And he would have 2 or 3 carloads of men who would accompany him to the bank. But the pastor had the money in his hand. And the pastor would take that money and put it in the night deposit satchel and actually bring it to the bank, and they would put it into the bank, and then they would all disappear. So this pastor took control of the money and made sure it was deposited in the bank every single Sunday. I don't think that was the best strategy, that the pastor was the one who was responsible for putting the money in the bank. And they had such a routine that when they came 2 to 3 cars deep. And if anybody wanted to hit them, they could have done it because they were very obvious in what they were doing. I would think that you would be inconspicuous when you're depositing $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, or $10,000 a Sunday. If that's what your church brings in, you want to be more inconspicuous than as visible as they were. I'm saying all of this to say, churches, we have to prepare ourselves for the inevitability of the potential. It's inevitable that some church is going to have somebody come in and try to take it over. It's going to happen. And the question is, pastor, church leaders, are you ready to defend yourself against somebody who wants to disrupt your church, wants to be a person who comes in with a weapon, whether it's a gun or a rifle or a knife, or in our communities, a machete, and wanting to hurt people? And so we were planning to have an active shooters training here at the church, and I wanted to have Detective Larry Ellison to be prominently a part of this because he is a friend to many of us in this church. He's a friend to many of us in the community, and he's the go-to person for us when we have a concern that's law enforcement related. So we had talked to the police department about Larry's being involved, and we had to go through a lot of red tape, but we have it all set up now where Detective Larry Ellison is going to be granted permission to be a part of this training, and the training is coming from the police academy. They're going to be coming to the church, and I asked, how long will the training be? And they said the training will be, it's really 45 minutes long, but when people ask questions, it can go as long as 2 hours. The second thing about the active shooters training is that I wanted to invite pastors and their church leaders to come and see it and be a part of it. And I was told, and there's many different people on different sides of this. I was told that the planning needs to be church specific. That means it needs to be in the church of the members. It needs to be in their church, because if a pastor goes to a training at another person's church, the exit doors, the church layout, the entranceway into the church, they're all different. And if you're being taught how to deal with an active shooter in somebody else's church, that is not going to help you with trying to put that training overlay it on your church. And so I was told that the training needs to be in each individual church. Now, that's a lot of work for the Boston Police Department to respond to the request from all the churches in the city, all the mosques, all the Roman Catholic services. It's a lot. It's a lot. All the synagogues in the city. It's a whole lot. And so what I'd like to do is set the date and set the time for the training here at Global Ministries Christian Church. Invite the pastors who would like to come in and some of their leaders and observe it and decide whether or not the training that they saw at Global Ministries could be retrofitted in their church. And if so, then they speak to the trainer and say, "Hi, I'm Pastor so-and-so. Could you bring this to my church?" So I would like to see a connection between the Boston Police Department and those who are training, Larry Ellison, and the other churches in the community. Wouldn't it be great if we could see all of our churches in Boston be trained to deal with an active shooter? And again, it may not be a person with a gun. Any type of weapon. What would you do with a person who came into your church during a worship service with a machete and they started swinging that machete at the people in your church? That machete could do a lot of damage. I don't know what I would do, because if I put my arms up to stop the person with the machete, I could lose a finger, a hand, or an arm. So it's not just the active shooter that we should be focusing on. We should be focusing on anybody who would come in with a weapon to disrupt your service and to do harm in your congregation. My phone number is 617-283-9561. 617-283-9561. Hey, an active shooter could go up to Mattapan Square, could go to Grove Hall, could go to Nubian Square, and they could injure people. They could hurt people anywhere. This could happen anywhere. But my focus today, my focus during this season, is wanting the churches to be prepared. In some churches, you have a lot of young people in the service. In some churches, you have more women in the churches than the men. In some churches, you have a lot of men in the churches, but are they trained? There are some churches who have senseis in their churches, and so their senseis there's a few karate schools. Our church has a karate ministry, and senseis should also be a part of this training, because they may be called on to help diffuse a problem that's taking place in the church. I had a person come into our church that we knew, and he took his fingers and he pointed it at somebody, and it was like his hand was the gun, and he didn't say pow, but he pointed it at the person and then pulled his hand back like it was a gun. And he was verbally threatening people in the church. We dialed 911 and we asked for help and assistance, and the EMS came, Boston Police came. It was diffused. Nobody got hurt. It was diffused. But I'm glad that we had a protocol, that we were able to make that call. And when the police came, they didn't harm anybody. They didn't arrest anybody. It was just diffused. And we've got to find a way of reaching out to our law enforcement representatives and seeking the help that we want, but not making the situation worse than it really was by having somebody who's having mental health struggles, who is crashing, and then actually have that person die at the hand of the police because the police didn't understand what their role was in diffusing that situation. Rather than diffusing it, they made matters worse. Have you seen a situation like that in your in your experience where the police who were not trained actually made matters worse? Church, we have to prepare ourselves for the inevitable. And that is that our churches can be invaded. I remember down south when I didn't pull out the names of all of these people, but that young man who went to a church down south, and he opened the door, and the video cam on the church was recording all of this, and he was invited to come in and stay for the prayer meeting. There could have been 9 or 10 people in the prayer meeting, and they were being so gracious to this young man. And this young man ended up shooting the pastor, who was a congressman, and shooting some of the members of the church. And he walked out of the prayer meeting and took off. How many times have you had visitors come into your prayer meeting, people that you did not even know, and you extended your hands, you offered them love and support, and they could have hurt you and taken the lives of everybody in that prayer meeting? This is serious. This is something that we have to think about, because here's a question I want to ask. And I don't know if any church people are listening. Many times people want to listen and not call in because they do not want to disrupt the flow. But I asked some people this question. Would the churches in Boston, would the church members in Boston submit to a touch, pat down security check before they came into the church? Or would they feel offended? Or would they say, you don't really have the right to put your hands on me? Because if you're going to have a pat down check, you're going to need to have women and men participate in the pat down check, because I don't think that men should be patting down women, and I don't think that the women should be patting down the men. So we've got to have a diverse team of men and women who are trained to make sure that the people that are coming into your church, whether you know them or not, and I honestly, I could see people in the church getting really upset and making comments, take your hands off me. Why are you touching me? Why are you going through my bag? I think a lot of churches, if this wasn't brought into the church carefully, some people would stop going to the church and decide to go somewhere else because they would feel offended. But the reason why I'm saying that this is probably a protocol that we need in our churches to have people checked, the ones you know and the ones you don't know, is because I saw for 3 years people in the church sign their names when they come in. At our church, during COVID, we locked the front doors and people had to come through the side handicap ramp door. When they came in, they had to sign in. They had to answer questions. They had to take a temperature check. And they had to wear a mask. If they didn't wear a mask, then we would give them one. That was a whole new protocol for the churches. But in order to save the lives of people in the church and to prevent the spread of the coronavirus, people submitted to that level of what I call preparation for service and security. So I'm believing that people should and would submit to a more thorough security check if you brought it into the church in stages. You know, you don't shock everybody one Sunday and your security team is at the back of the church and your security team starts checking people without any warning, without any preparation. We need to have security checks. There, I said it. We need to have security checks in our churches. Eric Kennedy said, I think if you're going to do something, I think just a metal detector detecting wand is less evasive. Christine says, I remember that shooting was in Charleston, South Carolina, and knew two of the people that passed from their college experience. That's interesting. Now, so Eric is saying a wand. So when I volunteered at the Shaver roller skating rink, we could not purchase a metal detector. So what they did is that they were given, I believe, a wand, and they used it to scan a person's body. But if I'm correct, and I might be incorrect, the last time I went to the mosque, I'm trying to figure out whether or not they didn't have a metal detector, but I believe they may have had a wand. I'm not sure. I'm going to find out. But even with the wand, they actually went into people's pocketbooks. They went into they took their hands and went into my jacket pocket and pulled out a pen. And I said to myself, this is really thorough. And I submitted to it because it's the Nation of Islam. I have been conditioned over the years, because I've been to the Nation before. I've been conditioned that when I go to the Nation of Islam, for my protection and for the protection of the people in the mosque, that's what they do. I was prepared. I was prepped. It didn't shock me. And my attitude was, if they're checking me as thoroughly, because they took the pen out of my pocket and they made sure it was a pen. Do you know how much time it takes for a wand scan, looking into a pocketbook, checking people's pockets? Do you know how long that takes? But at the Nation, they did it. And to be honest with you, I felt that as their service started, I felt that I was protected. I felt like a gun is not going to be pulled out. A machete's not going to be pulled out. Somebody's not going to throw a bomb at me or a grenade. I felt protected. I feel the same way when I travel on an airplane. I feel the same way when I go to the airport and they say, take off your shoes, take off your belt. And I make sure when I go to the airport that I'm not wearing a belt. I make sure that I'm wearing the kind of shoes that I can slip my feet in and slip my feet out. I just make it, I know what I'm going to go through, so I just make myself comfortable. And I prepare for it. Do I feel safer on the plane, on the airplane, because everybody's gone through security? Yes, I do. Would I feel safe if there was no security? No, I would not. When I go into a federal building, when I go into City Hall, when I go into the courthouse, there is security. Why do the churches believe that we do not have to scrutinize, we do not have to have a security setup in the church? Why are so many churches possibly not thinking about an active shooter and what should be done in the event that an active shooter comes into a church? Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Yes, hi. Reverend Wall, this is Bill Wright. How are you?
Hi, Bill. How you doing?
Good. I know you're discussing the issue of safety in the churches and metal detectors and wands. I hear some feedback on the line. I don't know what that is.
Let me see if I can. It's gone.
Can you hear me?
It's gone.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know that some years ago in New York City, where they had metal detectors to enter the building at City Hall, one council member was having a discussion with one of his political challengers, and the counselors were able to go around the metal detectors.
Yeah.
It was a privilege of their office, apparently. And this particular counselor did that with his visitor, political challenger.
Yeah.
They went upstairs to the city council chamber. The challenger pulled a gun and shot and killed that counselor.
Wow.
There was a police officer in the balcony.
Yeah.
He fired down and killed the assailant.
Wow.
At that time, Michael Bloomberg was the mayor,
Mm-hmm.
and shortly thereafter, he promoted that police officer to detective.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue has come up, of course, with the Boston schools about whether to have the metal detectors
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah, yeah.
And the city councilors or state legislators who discuss that, they walk through metal detectors every single day to go to work,
Yeah.
and they protect both workers there, legislators, and visitors of all types.
Yep.
I know that the concern people say is this preparing our children in schools in Boston to pipeline to prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that people who walk into City Hall or the State House feel that they're going any pipeline to prison, although, of course, some of our state leaders, in the State House in particular, have gone to prison. But the issue is this: what is more important, somebody's hurt feelings or somebody being shot and killed, or worse, numbers of people? And we've had at least 2 students being killed who were Jeremiah Burke students. One of the worst things would have to be any parent of a Boston Public School student who has to worry as they go to work every day whether their son or daughter is physically safe in the Boston school system. And as you know quite well, Reverend Wall, public safety is the first requirement, the first priority of any government.
Mm-hmm. Right. Someone on Facebook said that the wand is a great idea. They have started doing this at concerts. You may have people come a half hour earlier for the safety procedure. So because they know that they have to go through this, so they say, I want to get into this concert. Let's go early. For my position here, I want to disclose that I support the idea of having the metal detectors in the schools. This is blowing my mind that the black and brown members are the ones that are saying no metal detectors, prison, school to prison pipeline, all of that. You're offending these children. And the white members are saying that they want the security. How do you reconcile that, Bill?
Well, of course, the key thing is when these events have happened, you've seen Mayor Michelle Wu at the press conference at the site of the crime,
yeah,
with Commissioner Michael Cox behind her and DA Kevin Hayden standing behind her, and Mary Skipper, the superintendent.
Yeah.
And both of those individuals, the superintendent and the mayor. Hello?
That's somebody else coming on the phone,
Okay.
so keep going.
Well, both of those individuals, the mayor and the superintendent, speak about thoughts and prayers, right? And how terrible it is that these things are happening and how difficult it is. Could you imagine if what happened at Burke happened at Brookline High School,
Yeah.
Reverend Wall?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine if the numbers of homicides and other major crimes that are happening in Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan and the black and Latino communities
Yep.
were happening in those neighborhoods?
Yeah.
Take a trip sometime from Grove Hall to Brookline, where Northeastern has a baseball field. You're traveling to a different world, 2 different worlds. And even places like West Roxbury is like a suburban town. Kids in the past were able to leave their bicycles out on the lawn overnight, and they would still be there the next day.
Wow. Bill, stay there. I'm going to bring this other caller in. Caller, go ahead. You're live on the air with Bill and Bruce.
Good morning. This is Jamal Crawford calling. How y'all doing?
Okay.
Good, how are you?
How are you doing, my friend?
All right. Well, you talking about my little injury there, my
Yes.
boo-boo?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's painful, but thank God I still have the tip of my finger, and I bought a chef's knife, to get my chef on.
Yeah.
And all I can say is I'm gonna go on Amazon and say the knife works.
You're gonna write a nice review.
Yeah. It slices and it dices.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but once again, it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
I'm thankful to have the tip of my finger. And who knew you can get 9 stitches on the tip of your finger?
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, in any event, the last event that I did, if you might remember, at Hibernian Hall, I actually purchased a wand.
How much are the wands?
I think I paid either $29.99 or $39.99.
Okay.
Yeah, it ain't what it used to be, because something like that might have cost you a couple $100 back in the day.
Okay.
And of course, there are models that you could still get for a couple $100.
Mm-hmm.
But just a basic model, $39.99. And of course, like any tool, it only works if you know how to work it.
Okay.
Right? So if you still don't know the basics of how to do a pat down and a search, me and my old school crew would have got right past you with a wand.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So you have to know, how to use it and all that. Then, to the other point about city council, it's funny because, as you know, Boston City Hall has metal detectors, right?
Yes.
But me as an employee, and like people nobody goes to all employees. Think about that. That's a lot of people. Yeah. All employees, you hit with your little employee pass and you go in.
So they're not going through the metal detectors.
No, you don't have to. Unless you forget your badge or that's, you forget your badge. But yeah, other than that, you tap your badge and you're going through. Now, of course, the danger with that is, of course, as the U.S. Postal Service found out, well, let's just hope Bob's not having a bad day.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because, too, sometimes when you're dealing with security, it's not just the people, outside, the scary general public. Sometimes these people inside. Today is that day. They fed up. They're not filing one more piece of paper. And they're fed up. And so sometimes too, we have to have even more security protocols. I think for sometimes the people within.
Well, so to both you and Bill, that the last time I went to court, some, not all, but some of the court employees did go. No, it wasn't the court employees. It was the attorneys. All the attorneys can get in.
Attorneys, law enforcement, right. And all that. I mean, that's a little bit more of a controlled environment, so a case for that. But City Hall, once again, just in the City Hall building itself, I don't know how many employees is in there. It's got to be over 1,000, I would assume, of every manner and all that. So just those are considerations that just need to be thought of. And then another fun fact. One of my former supervisors, he was into, a lot of different things and whatnot. And in his office, as many do, they decorate the office. He had this really nice, samurai sword, right? So I always thought, well, if the zombie apocalypse comes, I know whose office I'm running to first. I'm grabbing that sword.
Well, Bill, when's the last time, Bill, you were in the Nation of Islam?
It's about 2 weeks ago.
And did you go to a service? Did you go through the pat down, the security check?
Yes, of course. And by the way, Jamal's point is really good about the employees being able to tap a card and get in.
Yeah.
That's obviously a weakness and flaw in the system at City Hall. Mm-hmm. You have to think about some disgruntled employee who maybe got fired that day, right? Yeah. But as far as the Nation of Islam, and I've gone through that in New York City and elsewhere, and of course in D.C. when you go into the Capitol buildings. The pat down included, as you said, women's pocketbooks, being looked at a separate side, of course, from the men. And if they're looking at your pen, you know that there are devices that are in pens and so forth that can actually be weapons. It's not James Bond stuff. It's just stuff that can be done. And even without something like that, a pen in and of itself is a very dangerous weapon if a person knows how to use it.
Right. If you jam somebody in their eye or in their ear, you could hurt them. So when they actually went in and grabbed my pen, I knew what they were doing, but I had never had that level of touching my body, all of my pockets, the way that they were doing it. I did. That's not even done at the airport. Their level of security or scanning people is a whole lot different, don't you think?
Well, at the airport, they do tests every once in a while and see how much stuff they can get through, whether it's weapons or other contraband. Mm-hmm. And typically they find that a lot of things get through. And also, sometimes you have a situation where somebody has a friend who's an employee at a certain security station who lets that friend go through in a different way than they really should be doing.
Yeah.
So those tests, it's very concerning if you realize what happens in those tests, that they find that lots of weapons still get through.
Yeah. Jamal, my wife and I went to North Carolina, and on the return back, I had packed my bag a certain way, and my wife was challenging me on how I packed the bag. And I left the room. I went and did something. We went to the airport. We were going through, and they flagged her carry-on because she had taken some of my items that shouldn't have been put in a carry-on item in her bag. I saw all those things were going to have to be left at the airport, and I said, Karen, I knew what I was doing when I was taking this out. So at the airport, Jamal, do you think that their level of scrutiny of checking people security-wise is more invasive or intense than what the nation does?
Oh, well, of course, yeah, it is. I mean, forget about metal detectors. They have that thing where, you go in now and you put your arms over your head, the magnetometer or whatever. That thing can basically see your butt naked. I mean, really, it does a level of scan that it really kind of just shows the shape of your body. And so if you had anything concealed, I don't think it goes penetrative. So if you had swallowed something or something like, I don't, and it actually might be an X-ray too. Yeah, if you were one of those like smugglers and you swallowed several bags of dope, that actually might show up. So but certainly, you ain't getting in there with a knife or anything on your body. If you think you got something taped to your body and you're gonna be slick, you're not. So certainly, and of course, everything that then they run your bags through. That's for sure an X-ray machine.
Right.
Separate your laptops and all this. Remember, after some of the initial scares, they used to rub that substance on your hands and your laptops to check and see if anything had been around, any bomb residue. That was after 9/11.
Reverend Wall, excuse me, Jamal. Reverend Wall, you may remember the instance where the famous Bill Russell, of course, the late Bill Russell, was in SeaTac Airport in Seattle, and he had forgotten that he had a loaded gun in his bag as it was being scanned.
Loaded, okay.
Yeah, he's an at the time, an elderly gentleman, and he's probably not the kind of person who walks around with an entourage of security, but can you imagine being the person doing the security check and seeing that you have to take Bill Russell aside because he had a weapon?
Yeah, that's
that happens very frequently. Surprise, surprise. It's happening a lot with a lot of these rappers. But as well, just regular entertainment people as well, and other celebrities. The classic. I forgot it was in my bag routine.
Well, I full confession here. I used to carry this little knife on my key ring. It may not have been legal, and Karen and I were going on a trip, and I said, I forgot that I had it on the key ring. And I got to the airport, and I said, what am I going to do with this knife? And I took the knife when nobody was looking, and I hid it somewhere in the baggage claim area so that when I came back, I can go to the baggage claim area and pick it up and take it home. When I got back, that bad boy was not there. So, yeah, you got to be careful. You got to remember when you're taking a trip that some of these things are not going to pass the muster of the security. Jamal and Bill, what let's go to the church. What does a person do if a person comes into your church with a machete, wanting to do harm? I could see that being a reality in our community. How do you defend yourself against a person swinging a machete? Because I wouldn't want to. I'm not trained for something like that. What do you do?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, Reverend Wall, there's certain things you have to think about in preparation before something happens. What would I do if an event happens? And nowadays, no matter where you might be, you think about what if somebody came in here shooting or had a knife or whatever. And part of it is the readiness that you don't freeze, hopefully. And again, it would be helpful if in a church, which, as you mentioned, there are not as many men as used to be the case, that the men who are there, and of course someone who might also have the mentality that if something happens quickly like that, hopefully would all just charge the person and hope for the best by your numbers. And you may remember the incident of in Richard Speck in Chicago, who killed 8 or 9 nurses in the same apartment. Had they known what was coming and recognized that their lives were going to end, they would have been better off attacking them as a group. As far as the small devices like a small penknife and so on, you may remember a fellow named Marshall Collins from Mission Hill Extension, where I grew up in public housing, who hijacked an Eastern Airlines plane that was going from New York to Boston, and he used simply razor blades.
Wow. Jamal?
So, okay, so, one, hopefully, if you don't have to engage, don't engage. If somebody began doing something like that, hopefully everybody could get away from that person quickly. But if you are forced to engage, a simple technique that I'm aware of, and that works for a knife or a machete, is if you remove your jacket and or shirt, sweater, anything like that, sweatshirt, anything like that, you hold it in front of yourself, and kind of like like you were bullfighting, El Toro.
Right.
And if you can catch that person when he swings, the shirt or sweatshirt or whatever absorbs the blow, and at the same time you can wrap their arm up, and now you can get control of the arm. So that's kind of a simple but not so simple thing, because of course you could time it badly and get your hand chopped off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So it can go both ways. I know I have disarmed a few people in that manner. So it does work. It's not something that everybody should have to do, only in an emergency if your back's against the wall. But machetes or any kind of smaller weapon is actually, to me, harder to defend against really than a gun, because you don't have to reload a knife. Number one,
just keep swinging.
Well, I mean, if I was sitting in a pew in a church, and just all of a sudden decide to go nuts, how many people could I stab in the pew before? Right. So it just it's. There's a bunch of different things, and folks also have to think about, simpler things. One thing that they used to, once again, after 9/11 and security was so tight, they no longer, you couldn't even have like a whole tube of toothpaste. You had to have the little one.
Right.
You couldn't even have a whole thing of shampoo. You had to have a little thing, right? And another thing they didn't have was cigarette lighters. You couldn't have a lighter on the plane anymore. For whatever reason, the last, several times I flew, you can now have a lighter in your pocket, which, of course, the havoc that one could wreak 30,000 feet in the air with a lighter locked in the bathroom is pretty crazy. Wow. And then the same thing, in a church. So forget the big Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Forget the I'm coming into your church with an AR-15, or forget that I'm coming into your church with a big old machete or something like that. What about somebody who just sets a bathroom fire and then at the same time sets a fire in the church cafeteria and then on the back stairway? All in under 90 seconds.
The churches are not. This church, I'll speak about us. We're not ready. One of our senior citizens, and I don't want you guys to laugh when I say this. One of our senior citizens, they're developing a senior citizens program at my church that shows you that we're aging.
And you mean by one of the seniors? You mean other than yourself?
I'm going to be a part of the seniors group. I can't believe that, Jamal. But one of the things that they're going to do is they asked Richard Scott, Sensei Richard Scott, if he would do a self-defense class for the seniors. How can the seniors defend themselves against somebody who would try to hurt them? So I'm going to the seniors self-defense class. I can't believe that. I can't even believe that I'm that age. But we're trying to hit this from every conceivable angle here at our church. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's good just in general, even if, because hopefully if you learn any form of martial arts or self-defense, the hope is always that you never have to use it. Yeah. But either way, whatever, it's just like learning how to swim. You go on that Martha's Ferry, you hope, you know what I mean? You hope it don't go down. Right. But if it does, you would like to know how to swim, So for me, it's like whatever happens, it's just good for health and wellness, and for y'all to just be moving your bodies and thinking about something and staying active, like seeing you on your bike and stuff like that. That's good stuff. That ain't gonna kill you like cigarettes or liquor or whatever. So you're moving in the right direction in terms of doing things. Yeah, that those things only have a benefit. There's no downside to that.
Right. Bill, I'll give you the final word. Bill? We may have lost him. Jamal, final word on our whole idea of the churches beginning to prepare themselves.
Well, that's it, and I would encourage you, to adopt whatever security systems you can. Once again, the wands, you can get those on Amazon. I would also encourage everybody, I think I might have told you about this before, for a non-lethal firearm, there's a thing I've been looking into. It's called the Burner.
The Burner.
BYRNA. Now, every church could have that. It fires either an actual hard ballistic projectile or it fires a pepper spray projectile. So you should look that up, byrna.com, and check that out. That might be something for your home, for your church, what have you. It's a non-lethal option, but it definitely has stopping power and definitely does the trick. So.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Be safely minded.
Okay.
Yes.
And Bill, thank you very much. Okay. God bless you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Boston Praise Radio and TV and Boston Black News combined together on 102.9 FM radio. I'm Pastor Bruce Wall, and we're preparing for Minister Priscilla with People Power with Priscilla coming up in just a few minutes. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for being a part of our broadcast family, and we'll look forward to doing this again tomorrow with our broadcast team. Let's go to some music as we prepare